went to Canaan, up on the Mass border, went to Canaan to the New England Accordion Museum, did about an hour and a half interview, cut that down to about 4 minutes. That interview went on to 28 public radio stations across New England, and then it got picked up by NPR out of Boston. So what my client said to me was, I've been an obscure CPA for 40 years. You get me on NPR, and I can't walk down the street without people stopping me and saying, "Wow, I heard you on NPR. This is exciting." So it can blossom. You never know where it's going to take you, and that's the important thing. I'm saddened to read the statistics that a large number of people in the United States are getting their quote unquote news from social media, when indeed we have all these, shall I say, well trained, highly trained, authoritative reporters doing deep research. And they're coming up with statistics, they're coming up with data, they're coming up with information that's important for factual information versus somebody just saying, well, you should go out and buy this product because I used it and I found it to be extremely helpful. So you've got an authoritative reporter saying, here's the pros, here's the cons of that particular product after doing much research. I used to do PR for Consumer Reports magazine. Consumer Reports magazine never ever has taken advertising, and they always do thorough examinations of every product available to consumers across the United States, from refrigerators to cars. Their car issue is one of the most sought after issues in the United States for buying a good car. And so I used to, as a PR person, I had some struggles over my career. I would call a newspaper and say, "This is Barbara Branagan with such and such a company." I said, "What do you want?" It was like they were abrupt. But when I would call a company and say, "This is Barbara Branagan Mitchell with Consumer Reports magazine." "Oh, Barbara, what can I do for you?" That's authoritative voice, Eric. When people hear Consumer Reports and they hear that credibility, that's a very important credential for the reporter, the editor. It's respected. And that's what we want more and more of.
Right. And part of that respect, though, comes from, the fact that, yes, they do have to do their research. And so as a PR person, you're providing them with information, you're providing them with a reputable source. So what kind of background do you have to do to make sure that what you're putting together meets those criteria?
Well, as you can well imagine, I never put out a press release without the client's assurance to me that everything that I'm sending out is approved by them and vetted by them. So that's an important criteria. I'm representing some big companies over the years. When I used to, I represented Rand McNally Travel Guides. That Rand McNally is not as popular today as it was many decades ago, but they put out something called Places Rated Almanac. Now, this was a highly, highly researched almanac guidebook of the best places in the United States to live, to raise a family, the cost of living, schools, museums, arts, culture, etc. They looked at every city across the United States. So we had a press conference. Now, I'm going to be part of a press conference. I have to rely on my clients to ensure that they're giving me the data, the information that is credible to the audiences. So we actually had a press conference, and I bet you right now, Eric, you can't imagine what the most popular place was in 1997 to live in the United States.
1997. I'm going to guess San Francisco.
Oh, no.
No?
Think East Coast, Eric. Think East Coast.
East Coast, New York City.
Nope. Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh, really?
Yes, that's exactly right. That's people said exactly the same words.
It's like I've been to Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh. So that's how exciting it was. You could imagine that the reporters and the editors were extremely stunned. And that was the day when we had telephone booths, and they would run up to the telephone booths to call their editors and report Pittsburgh is the number one place. And I spent 2 days on the telephone, people calling me directly from all across the United States saying, where did our city rank? Where did our town rank? So that authority is crucial to me giving that factual information. I used to do public relations publicity for Cruise Line International Association. 28 cruise lines, 86 ships. It was mandatory that they gave me the correct information about upcoming cruises. I was feeding that information to the Wall Street Journal, to the Chicago Tribune, the LA Times. So you could be guaranteed that if that the information is incorrect, that reflects back to the client, not so much on me as it does for the client feeding me the information that I'm feeding to their targeted audiences.
So we've been talking a lot about print, but what about getting word out through television, news, radio, or even live events? I know you've done things with that.
Absolutely. Well, you have to pitch that in a certain way, different way. Pitching a newspaper article is more, shall I say, a standard press release. When pitching to the television reporters, you have to tell them more clearly who is doing what, when they're doing it, where they're doing it, and most importantly, why it's of interest to their specific target audiences. And you have to do it in, shall I say, very brief paragraphs. So you literally have to spell it out for them quickly because they're so bombarded. If I call a news editor at, shall I say, WFSB TV, they're inundated with suggestions on interviewers. So I have to be very specific and very quick. So it's important to say this is taking place in West Hartford at 3 o'clock this coming Friday. This is why it's of interest. Up, 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 up. Very, 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 very quick. So it's fascinating. I love it. It certainly gets my my public relation energies going because I have to keep pace with their extreme stress levels. News is very, very demanding profession, especially for television and radio. They're in the moment constantly. So again, I had a gentleman who published a book over here in Danbury. He was the great grandson of the founder of the Danbury State Fair back in the 1940s. And so he wrote a book about the Danbury State Fair. And we had a book signing. We had a big event. I did a lot of publicity. And I was able to get him on radio stations all through the area over to New York, Westchester County, Putnam County, all through Fairfield County. Now, if I had reached over to West Hartford, to Norwalk, over to New London, there would not be that interest level. So it's up to me as a PR specialist to hone in on the target audience, the venues, the media outlets that are going to provide my clients with the biggest bang for their PR investment buck.
Now, what advice do you give your clients once the press release, the interview request has already been put together and granted, especially when you're dealing with television and radio? I mean, they're looking for sound bites. I mean, you said earlier they had radio network had a 1.5 hour interview that they cut down to 4 minutes.
Exactly.
How do you communicate when you're being interviewed to a reporter, whether it's TV, radio, to make sure you're getting your point across?
Well, when I used to work in several public relations agencies in Manhattan, I had international and national clients, and we did media training. So we would sit with a client weeks before their interview. I used to do a lot of media tours, and we would train those people to go on these tours to represent their company. Now, here was an amusing thing. I had Rand McNally. They published a book about national parks, and they published a book about the Great Smoky Mountains. Wonderful place to tour, and they hired a park ranger to be the representative for the book. So I had this great interview on this local television show in Atlanta, and it was very exciting, and it was live, Eric. It was live, and the man never mentioned the book.
Oh no.
Is so I'm standing in the wings and I'm holding up the book and I'm like, trying to get him to do the book. Blessedly, the interviewer, she stepped in and said, "So tell us more about the book." And she held up the book herself because he just wasn't doing that. He wasn't understanding. He was there not to talk about the Great Smoky Mountains as much as he was there to represent Rand McNally's book. So I've had some interesting challenges, Eric, most definitely. Amusing afterward.
Yes. Right. Right. I'm sure it wasn't as amusing at the time.
No. So I try to train my clients, and we do quote unquote fake question and answers. So I would write up a group of questions, and I would verbally present it to that person, and we would hone the answers. So that's always highly recommended to clients when we do interviews especially on live television, most definitely.
Well, we're coming up at the end of our time. So thank you very much for coming on the Success Showcase. And
Oh,
before we
thank
go,
you.
what do you think is the big takeaway our listeners need to have about utilizing public relations?
Well, my suggestion, of course, is to use a professional publicist like myself, Barbara Branagan Mitchell, Branagan Communication Consultants. .com, and because we have the profession, we have the expertise, we have the polish, we know how to do the job. Shall I say rapidly? An awful lot of people come to me and say, "I've sent out a press release, it didn't go anywhere because they didn't know the formula." We all know our trades, and there's a formula to everything we do. So my biggest suggestion is to hire a professional publicist to help you with your campaigns.
All right. And if our audience wants to get a hold of you for more information, how can they reach you?
BranaganCommunications.com is my website. Barbara at BranaganCommunications.com. Branagan is Branagan, all A's. Or you can call me at 860-210-0149. 860-210-0149.
Fantastic. You've given us some great information. Thanks so much for being on this week.
Thank you very much, Eric, and enjoy your week.
You too. You've been
Thank
listening
you.
to the You've been listening to the Success Showcase. You can catch us every week at xvadio.com/podcasts. You can also find us on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts app, the iTunes Store, Spotify, and wherever you find podcasts. Remember, make this your best week ever and make next week even better. See you then.